Hello and welcome to the Love Rugby League Podcast, Rugby League's newest show, giving you the inside information on all the big news within the sport. I'm Matt Shaw, alongside me, another leading journalist, the leading journalist, he won't like me saying that, Aaron Bauer. Aaron, back together,
yes.
Finally, years apart. I don't know what you've done to deserve such punishment.
Yeah, feel like I've had some misery inflicted on me. Back together. I was trying to think, was it about 6 years, something like that, maybe?
20, like
just
COVID,
before COVID,
yeah,
so
COVID, and then we split.
Like any good soap opera story.
And then we're back
together.
Band's back together, ready to talk about the big news in rugby league.
Absolutely.
Look, let's get into it. There's no point messing around. The big news breaking today, broke on Love Rugby League over the weekend. Mike Rush has left St Helens. Look, I'll be honest, I'm surprised. Not surprised that there's been an outcome where Mike Rush has left. I'm surprised it's happened so soon since Paul Rowley joined the club. What's your take on it all?
Yeah, I think the timing of it is definitely the thing that jumps out. We were speaking over the weekend that it's kind of felt like this was going to happen at some point. The very decision to bring Paul Rowley in suggested that the sort of tectonic plates at St Helens were shifting power-wise and who would make the decisions. And that, I think we both know from signings that have been made over the off-season and things like that, that people like Mike Rush that had a lot of say and a lot of authority, if not almost all of the authority at St Helens in certain areas, that has started to change a little bit. Obviously, Mike Rush, we should say, has done a phenomenal job at St Helens. 27 years, I think. I mean, I remember when I started out, he was the interim coach. I remember interviewing him in a room at Wakefield.
After Royce Simmons.
Yeah, and he's gone on to become not just a CEO, but an absolutely outstanding CEO for the game. It oversaw what I would probably say is the best side we've seen in Super League. I mean, 4 titles in a row. And that was, Mike Rush's influence was all over that, even though it was Justin Holbrook, Christian Wolf doing the coaching. It's Mike Rush that has almost epitomised and synonymised what St Helens have been about for the last 20 years. So I think this was always going to happen at some point with Paul Rowley coming in. Did I expect it to happen 3 days after their first game of the season? Almost certainly not. But that kind of tells you a little bit, I think, and you'll know more than me, Matt, about where St Helens are trying to go now and how they are trying to sort of show this is a fresh start under Paul Rowley, isn't it?
It feels like a complete changing of the guard at Saints, doesn't it? Because only a couple of months ago, Paul Wellens leaves, club legend, been there a quarter of a century, James Roby leaves. You got 3 guys who've been there a quarter of a century. And obviously with Paul Rowley coming in, I think people might be confused why we didn't think Paul Rowley, Mike Rush in the same club would work. For me, Paul Rowley's always been a lead on recruitment. He's always been on the and
you
Mike
look at
Rush,
every club he's been at.
Yeah,
Lee back when Toronto he drove that ship.
There was Brian Noble as well, wasn't there, on the recruitment front? But very much Paul Rowley played a very, very senior role in that.
And Salford last year.
Even going into director of rugby.
Yeah, in recent years at Salford, I know there were people like Paul King above him and stuff, but Paul was trusted to do a lot of the recruitment, wasn't he? He had a lot of autonomy, a lot of power, and I think it always felt, we both knew this, we both suspected this, that going into a club like St Helens, someone would have to give up a little bit of control for Paul to come in and be able to do what Paul does.
Yeah.
And I think this has happened very, very quickly, but it's a clear sign of where they want to go as a club.
Yeah, because at Saints, it's almost, in recent years, certainly been more of a committee, hasn't it? Yeah. That Mike Rush plays a very important role in.
Heads it,
yeah. Yeah, the head coach doesn't necessarily get the say.
Well, Paul Wellens certainly didn't, did
Paul,
he, in that
Paul
sense?
Wellens didn't on a lot of occasions. So, yeah, and then obviously the sounds coming out of saying before they appointed Paul Rowley was we haven't got a lot of money to spend. There's not many players to go out there. Paul Rowley comes in. They got Jackson Hastings, David Clemmer, Nene McDonald, Joe Shorrock, Jacob. So it's like there was very clearly so look, I think it always felt like something would give. It's just interesting timing, and obviously exasperated by what John Wilkins said on Friday. Look, we've covered the Matt Purcell story quite hard. It looks like he's on his way to Huddersfield, which I think will catch many people by surprise. Great pickup for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they were explosive comments, to be fair.
They were explosive, but I thought, John's quite controversial, isn't he, in what he says and how he says it, but I thought actually he came across really eloquently, really passionately. As he said, these people are his friends. Yeah. He's played with them for a long period of time.
It's his club as well,
It's his club, yeah. He's another one that's sort of associated with the St Helens and nobody else really, despite not being from St Helens. So I think when, when someone like John comes out and sort of takes aim at that, he actually hinted, didn't he, that there were changes coming over the horizon. Not sure we expected them to happen so quickly, but obviously this has been announced, and it does, as I say, underline that Saints are now moving in a very different direction. That era of 4 in a row has sort of petered out a little bit, with Paul coming in, them not really kicking on again, which is understandable because a lot of that great squad either left or came to the end of their playing careers. Some of them are still coming to the end of their playing careers, but it sort of felt like this was the moment for a fresh start when Paul came in, and I think this sort of just puts the full stop on that, doesn't it?
It does. It'll be interesting to see how they replace Mike Rush. I think Eamon Manners are going to take a more hands-on role.
Yeah, I'm led
now.
to believe that might happen.
But on the field, obviously not a good start. Amazing following, came to watch them, but that first half in particular, they were poor. Early season, I am not one to judge a team on one round, albeit my 7th place prediction did look a little bit stronger after one round. But some work to do, definitely some work to do there. I tell you what I did find interesting, Jackson Hastings was captain.
I was surprised by that. I know Johnny Lomax was on the bench, but you looked at that squad, you thought Darryl Clark could have taken the armband and Alex Walmsley could have taken it.
Jack Wellesby's captain England.
Well, Jack Wellesby's captain England, yeah. That was quite telling. And again, I thought, we know the relationship between Jackson and Paul Rowley. Another telling sign, I thought, of Paul nailing his colours to the mast and saying, look, this guy, I've brought this guy in. This guy's my captain. This is the way we're going to go. And if we don't like it, well, we're going to have some serious conversations. I thought that was another telling moment to give him the armband.
I agree. Right, let's move on. Hull KR, World Club Challenge Week, a big week for Super League, for the sport, but for Hull KR, first one they've ever competed in. The preparation has not gone to plan. I'll say it, I think the biggest shock in Super League history, that result. I can't think of one.
Yeah.
For context, York were 40-1 to win the match.
Is that right?
40-1.
She told me that on Thursday afternoon.
Well, if I'd have known what was going to happen, I would have been all over it. I can't imagine you've got longer odds.
No, certainly not in a 2-horse race like that. Yeah, there were people in the press box on Thursday night. I was at the game saying probably the most significant result Super League's ever seen, and we're going to get onto, I'm sure, the merits of 14 teams in a little bit. But potentially the biggest shock. Yeah, I mean, you know a lot about Hull KR. You cover them in depth. Did it look and feel as though they were just holding a little bit back with next week in mind? I don't know. Some of the chat pre-game was subconsciously, you get one tackle wrong, you might get a charge. You get one tackle wrong in attack or defensively, and you get a head knock that rules you out of next week. It looked like Jez Litton was gone after 30 seconds.
There were a lot of heart and mouths there.
There were a lot, yeah. And then Dean Hadley goes off in the warm-up. Yeah. Obviously, Mikey with the trip on Liam Harris. It just all felt a bit of a mismatch and almost felt like their eyes were down the road a little bit. I don't know whether you agree.
I didn't get that. Look, I know it was tight at half-time, but we've seen this script play out in Hull KR games. They don't chase points early on. And they wait for teams to crack. Now, in full credit to York, they didn't crack in that first half.
I think there was a period in that first half, maybe about 10 minutes, where York were almost consistently defending the line, and they caught them out wide a couple of times, but York scrambled superbly. I thought their outside backs in that regard
their outside backs were great.
Yeah, Galliano was very good. Sam Wood was very good. A big night for him as well, having sort of had a disappointing year at Cass last year. But it looked like they were going to eventually, as you say, grind them down. It's what Rovers pride themselves on, don't they? Complete hard, don't push, don't chase, and just eventually wear teams down, whether they're good teams or bad teams. They almost always get them, but it wasn't to be that.
But let's be honest, they had done. It was 18-6, after half time, and they were in complete control of that game at 18-6. I'm not going to say they were playing well. They weren't playing well, but they were doing enough to win the game. And then Mikey, look, Mikey Lewis is an exceptional player, and I know people try and talk him down. He put in the best performance of his career in the grand final last year, but there is no excusing that. There's no justifying that trip. It was stupid. It was inexcusable, and he let his team down. It cost them the game.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Mikey Lewis doesn't get that sin bin. York don't come back. They don't come back into that game.
No, probably not. But I was there, and I never quite sensed York's heads collectively falling at any point.
No,
when it went 18-6, you thought, oh, well, this is the moment now. Rovers will really kick on. But again, I think the following set, York kept Rovers inside their own half, forced them to kick from deep. And you never really felt as though York were going away. As you say, the sin bin changes everything. York almost grow an extra leg, don't they, collectively? And they've managed to find a way to get it back to 18-12. It becomes a 6-point game. But Mikey comes back on and it's still only 18-12. The momentum has shifted and it is all with York. I just thought York deserve immense credit for finding a way to beat the Super League champions like that. As I say, the game wasn't level when Mikey come back on. They were still losing. They still had to score again.
Yep.
The nature of the winning drop goal, I thought, I know it'll get overlooked in all the chaos, but the composure York showed. I thought Liam Harris had a really difficult opening 50 minutes.
He did.
You know, and he's got some history with Rovers, obviously. I think there's a bit of... Him and Mikey have crossed paths, haven't they, a couple of times?
Quite clearly.
Yeah, quite clearly.
Whether it were on the pitch or off the pitch.
From an early altercation, it was obvious there was a little bit there. But Liam was fantastic in those 2 tries that got York back in it. And then the composure to Siata Hingano, it was actually not a dissimilar drop goal situation to the one that got Rovers in the Challenge Cup final.
Yeah.
With both halfbacks involved. It wasn't just a straight drop goal, it was both involved, and Hingano nailed it superbly. And I just thought it was a great night for Super League. I know we are neutral and we definitely didn't have a preference on who we wanted to win, but it was just fantastic for the comp to see the opening night not be the blowout some people feared, not be a one-sided affair where it looks like the promoted teams are going to have a struggle. And, you know, Rovers played their part in a great game. And we'll drill into the World Club Challenge now, I'm sure. I'm not as convinced as some people that leans into them automatically having a bad night at the office on Thursday. I remember St Helens years ago. I think they lost the first 2 games of the season going into a World Club Challenge and they beat Brisbane. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything. And look, Willie Peters is fantastic at moving on, putting this to bed. We'll concentrate on the next game. Rovers very, very, very rarely play bad 2 games in a row, do they? You know that.
Yeah.
I think you'll see a real response from them this week.
I do. Just on your York point, I think it's fantastic for the competition. I think it's brilliant for I just thought the whole night. Yeah. I mean, the whole week's been great. I think 90% occupancy across Super League in attendances, which is unbelievable. But for 2 of the... Look, we'll get on to 14 teams in a minute, but for 2 of the promoted teams to win...
and the other one to go really close as well.
Bradford were up with, 15 minutes to go?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I think great. As for Hull KR, that last 15... Once Mikey Lewis got sin-binned, I did think they collapsed a bit. I thought physically... But I'm trying not to overlook... I'm trying not to overread into that at the minute because we've got new rules, we've got new ruck speed. Rovers are really good in the wrestle and it's almost removing that a little bit. So is it that rather than they're just a bit off it defensively, physically? I don't know.
Yeah, they didn't... the 6 again count was astronomical at one point against York. I think it was 7-0.
Yeah.
The penalties were in York's favour. Yeah, I think it was 9-2 at half-time. But the 6 agains were heavily against York. So the ruck rules are interesting. Whether it's given Rovers a little bit of an early insight into what they're going to have to do this Thursday as well. Obviously, it's going to be quick, isn't it? It's going to be fast. We don't know what the weather's going to be like. That might slow it down a little bit, but the MKM's got a great pitch, great surface. It's conducive.
It wasn't great. I was there yesterday. It was a bit bare in the middle.
Okay.
It wasn't. A few of the players were looking out on it, going, "Oh, it's not."
Oh, really? The Broncos players, I assume.
Yeah. So who knows? Look, are we giving Ulkiar a chance? I am. I'm giving them a chance.
I do. Yeah. They're the outsiders. Of course, they're the outsiders. When has a Super League team not been the outsiders in a World Club Challenge? But that is almost the point. Yeah. You know, the last 2 World Club Challenges, St Helens went to Penrith and won. No one gave them a chance. Maybe some people did give Wigan a chance at home to Penrith.
Yeah.
And Wigan were fantastic that night, by the way. So I do give Rovers a chance. You almost need a bit of a perfect storm, I think, on nights like these. Storm potentially being the key word. If the weather is a little bit off and it's not favourable and Rovers can slow it down a little bit more, which, as you say, plays into their strengths, I think the start is key for Rovers. I think what you don't want is to be falling behind against a side like Brisbane early on. And when I say that, I mean 6, 10, 12 points. You don't want to be chasing the game early on because although Rovers back themselves to do it, Rovers actually are better when they're in control of games.
They're better leading the score.
They are
that's what they've... I mean, last year, they were always scoring inside 20 minutes, weren't they? Yeah. And then they just wait and they get to the end of an half and go bang and just kill teams off.
I know it's only one player. I would have given them far less a chance had that Jeslett and HIA gone another way.
100%.
Because there is a lot of talk on Mikey and Tyrone May, etc., etc. But Jez is absolutely integral to every single thing they do. And it would have been interesting.
Dean Hadley, by the way.
And it would have been interesting to see what Rovers would have done at hooker had Jez not made it, would they have gone with Bill Leyland? I suspect it probably would have been Carl Lawton that would have played hooker. But that's a huge plus for them. And as you say, they'll be sweating on Dean in the next 48, 72 hours to see if he can make it, because they just didn't have that same punch on the edge, I thought, without Dean Hadley as well. I know he was down to start in the front row, but he will play back row if he plays this week, because Tom Amon is fit, isn't he, this week?
He is.
So Tom will go into the front row, Dean Hadley will go into the back row. So I give them a chance, but it's going to be a tough night. Like they have to be in the game at half time. They don't want to be chasing going into that second half.
No, agree. Right, what about 14-team Super League? Now,
we might have been wrong here.
No, right.
I've been reminded on social media a lot this weekend.
Yeah, we unfortunately sometimes when you're vocal on things, you have to take your medicine. Yeah. And this weekend we both had to take our medicine because we were both, and let's be fair, most people very, very critical of a 14-team Super League so quickly. Yeah. Because they won't be able to put squads together that are competitive. Well, York beat the treble winners. Toulouse beat a team that finished in the playoffs last year. Bradford got very close to Hull FC. Do you know, by the way, if you'd have put money on York and Toulouse to win, you could get 800 to 1 odds.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So someone may well have made a lot of money this week.
Yeah.
Just
some eternal optimist.
It was 16,000 to 1 for a treble of the
for all three of them to win. Yeah. Which you wouldn't have won because Bradford lost.
I would have. Yeah, but I would have not.
But you're right about 14. I think the concern we all had, a lot of people had, was is the player pool deep enough to sustain 14 elite teams? And I am still willing to admit or believe that it isn't. I still
agree.
I still don't think it is strong enough. That's not to say that York, Toulouse and Bradford don't have good players within their squads. Of course they do. But I think if you look across the board, and I think, again, this is not me trying to hammer home that our opinion might be right in the long run, but if you get to 6, 8, 10 weeks into the season, and I'm just spitting out an example, if York lose a Paul Vaughan for 3 months, that leaves a huge hole in their squad, doesn't it? Yeah. You know, if Toulouse went without Ollie Asholbot for a couple of months, that would be a huge blow for them. Yeah. Bradford lose Sutton, Ackers, they're going to be in trouble. So at this moment in time, with the season raw and fresh, and we can only judge it one round in, it looks like 14 teams has been the right move. That's not to say that in 8 to 10 weeks things will level out, things will settle out, and the bigger squads, the better squads invariably finish at the top of the competition, and the weaker squads, we saw it last year, Castleford had to go into the market almost consistently because the squad wasn't strong enough, the squad wasn't deep enough. Huddersfield had 2 or 3 key players out for the bulk of the season, and they struggled. And then we all know what happened to Salford once their squad started to get ripped apart. So the better squads invariably finish at the top end of the division. I think the 3 promoted squads are among the 3 or 4 weaker squads in the division, and I still think we will see them lose more games than they win. But for a competition that is going to market at the minute, excuse me, and trying to find a broadcast deal and trying to provoke a bidding war, which we know they want, they're desperate for other people than Sky to come to the market. That is some brilliant ammunition to go to the market with and say, look at what we've done on the opening weekend. 90% stadium occupancy. I think the biggest winning margin might have been 12 points or 14 points. Catalans were 14. The biggest winning margin.
26-10, wasn't it?
Yeah, there were 3 or 4 games where the winning margin was in single figures. 2 promoted teams winning, 2 French teams winning as well, by the way. Another brilliant coup for the game. I think in terms of a start, I don't think you could have had a much better start. And I think, as I say, the key for the game this year, it's really boring, and it's probably a point I'm going to hammer home all year, as will you, is what that broadcast deal looks like. I know the action's happening on the field. The real story this year to follow is the one off the field. Because if that broadcast deal goes down, there are going to be a lot of unhappy clubs and club owners that are going to have to put some serious money in. If they can pull a rabbit out of the hat and get a bidding war going and get that TV deal up, the game's in a great place. It really, really is in a great place, I think.
So a few points on that from me. I still think the promoted clubs will be the 3 bottom teams on the table. I will say this now.
I do agree.
Clip it up. I don't care.
I agree.
The bottom 3.
Huddersfield are the only one that could potentially complicate it for me, but I think, I'd be surprised if they weren't 12, 13 and 14. You can pick whatever order you want, by the way, but
Yeah, but I completely agree. Great week for Super League in terms of broadcasting, because you want stories. York beating OKR was a massive story. And on the broadcast deal, look, the way I look at it is simple. We're always told what brings in more broadcast money. It's attendances and viewing figures and eyes on the sport. Well, attendances are up. viewing figures are up, eyes on the sports up. Surely it should go up. But I appreciate that's easy to say. If you don't get two parties in the race.
This is the thing. It's only worth, at this moment in time, Sky have consistently been the only party at the table for a prolonged period of time. So that value of Super League is worth whatever Sky deem it to be worth. Let's say Sky come in and say, we'll give you 18 million quid a year. That's down on what they're getting at the minute, of course. Well, Super League has no option but to take that. So Sky know that they're in a very, very strong bargaining position. Whereas if, hypothetically, a DAZN, a TNT decide
TNT seem the one to me.
Yeah, they've lost a lot of sport,
Yeah,
haven't they? They have lost a lot of sport. And there is a gap there. And they already do rugby union. Whether they want to corner off the rugby market, I don't know. But all of a sudden, if Sky say, well, we'll give you 18 million, and Super League or RL Commercial can say, well, actually, TNT wants to give us 20. So you might lose Super League for the first time ever here. That's what they are desperate for behind the scenes. That's what the people who we speak to say, that a strong broadcast deal hinges on being able to convince at least one more broadcaster that this is worth investing in, because otherwise Sky have a free run at it, like Sky have already had a free run at it for a long time, which is no bad thing, by the way. That is not us saying Sky are bad for rugby league. Sky have
They're
been
unbelievable. People criticise Sky.
I think Sky's coverage is consistently great.
They've been unbelievably good for Super League. Super League wouldn't exist without.
No.
That's the reality of the situation.
And they're going to go big on Vegas again, aren't they? They're going to do a really good job around Vegas, which they did last year. So Sky are fantastic. I think the perfect goal, if you were to push the higher ups at RL Commercial, would be Sky get into a bidding war with someone else and Sky eventually get the rights again. That would be the ideal outcome. But as you say, going back to 14 teams, that was almost, if you could have pitched an opening weekend for what you would want your comp to look like, with all the noise around 14 from idiots like me and you saying it's not good enough, I think that was about as good as you could have got.
I agree. Right, this ties in nicely with the next topic. Bit of an exclusive, I suppose. Salary cap meeting this week.
Yeah.
And this is, sounds I get, this is going to be an interesting call, because there are a lot of different opinions on what should happen with the salary cap, when it should happen. Obviously, the broadcast deal hinges into that, because how do you make decisions on the salary cap? I'll leave this to you. What you give us the lowdown on where we're at with this meeting this week.
Yeah, a little bit like you. These salary cap meetings are often quite mundane, and in terms of concrete ideas coming to the table, it's always just chatter, isn't it? There's nothing, I think, when was the last time we increased the salary cap, Matt? You'll know this. Was it about 2 or 3 years ago now, just coming out of COVID?
They made different marquee allowances, didn't they? That didn't technically push the cap up.
But the finite limit of 2.1 has consistently been a while, yeah. So I am aware, and as I'm sure you are, I know of at least two really, really big Super League clubs that are going to push for this cap to go. There is a feeling that...
Well, let's be honest. Paul Lakin spoke to Love Rugby League, in Tenerife, and said the cap changes need to be made. Matt Pete said in his press conference, changes need to be made. We know where Wigan and Hull KR stand on this.
Yeah.
They want it. They want changes. How they look...
I don't think it's very difficult to work out who the other clubs would be that would advocate some sort of salary cap change as well. There is pretty much what I think you would say a big six in Super League of the two Hull clubs, Warrington, St Helens, Wigan and Leeds.
Yeah, but that's interesting, because St Helens have always...
No. I mean, in terms of the clubs that generally have the power to sort of drive these conversations. That's not to say all 6 of them would advocate a cap change, but I was speaking to a CEO at the Super League launch who was telling me that the game's just stood still now, and we are at a point where you need to let your ambitious clubs, move forward now and go. And if you drill into it, the clubs that are spending over and above the salary cap with allowances, I think there's clubs spending 3 million quid.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of loopholes and allowances to get around. So they're spending 50% over the finite limit on the cap, aren't they? I think if you were to allow all clubs to spend whatever they wanted, this CEO was saying to me, the table probably wouldn't look too much different to what it looks like now. You wouldn't all of a sudden have a Huddersfield springing to the top end of Super League, for example, would you? And your Wigans and your Leeds and your Hull clubs would probably consistently be around the top end. Yeah. So what's better for the game? To keep everyone constrained in the same bubble, spending the same amount, and the table being basically what it would be anyway, or give your ambitious clubs a chance to go into the market. And what if someone wants to throw £1 million at Nathan Cleary and he can't say no to that? What if someone wants to throw 750 grand at Owen Farrell, and he can't say no to that. Wigan in the late 80s and the early 90s were world famous because they had a super squad.
Yep.
Okay. Was it bad for the game? Yes, it was bad for the game in terms of they won everything all the time. It was great for Wigan, obviously, but their squad was filled with household names that dominated the national media agenda. They were getting cut through like you wouldn't believe in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Afire, Robinson, Edward, the list is endless. If you allowed your more ambitious and your bigger spending clubs to be able to go into the market and pull big names and big talent into Super League, I think that can only be a good thing for the competition. And I don't think necessarily removing the cap would change the status quo in Super League too much. I don't know what you think.
I have a slightly different opinion. So I don't think upping the cap at the top end changes anything, because you reference a Cleary or Farrell. Well, you can still try and go get them with a marquee, right?
Yeah.
And the amount of money in the NRL now, the golfing salary cap, you're not going to bridge it enough where you're going to make a meaningful difference in terms of getting the superstars over or not. My concern is more at the bottom of the salary cap. We're paying people minimum wage at the the young lads.
Yeah.
We're losing them to the game. We're losing them to Super League because they either go to another sport or they just think, I'll just have a crack at the NRL, because they can go over there and be a bottom ender and earn way more money. And there's nothing, and you can't pay them over that threshold. I think it's 35,000 without them going on your cap. And that's the nightmare for clubs for me. So what I'd prefer
it's not the money it's not the amount of money that the clubs are giving them is the problem. It's the restrictions surrounding
they couldn't,
it.
Because if they go above 35,
they go on to the cap. Yeah.
So what I'd like to see, allow more spending, but at the bottom. So maybe you put it up to 50 grand or something to entice these guys who are, the training and committing their life to be professional athletes. Let's give them wages that reflect that, So I would prefer to see that happen.
Doesn't removing the cap just allow for that anyway, though?
It would do. But I think you then keep a constraint on spending not being massively, but you are helping the clubs who. Yeah. And I think my reason for that is, especially with Perth and PNG coming in, and we're already seeing the exodus, and it's going to keep happening.
It is, yeah.
So we've got to do more to keep the young lads, because they're looking younger and younger and younger now. Players. I mean, we've seen players from scholarship go to the NRL. Yeah. When has that ever happened before?
Well, there's players that have come back to Super League that are good examples to young kids of actually, if you go, Bailey Hodgson is one that jumps out straight away.
100%. Dom Young. He played a bit of Super League.
Absolutely, I think he played 2 games or something. Yeah. But go and have a chance, take a punt on it, and if it doesn't work out, you've got the NRL on your CV. You can come back. Yeah, I agree with that we need to stop the player drain, and I just think the simplest way to do that is
I do
cap being abolished.
I do get you can abolish the cap, but I'm not sure. Like you said, I'm not sure how many could actually make the most of it, and how much they'd make the most of it either. If they could, your Wiggins would.
Both Hull clubs. Yeah, the Wiggins, Warringtons of this world. I think Leeds would probably go and have a crack at it. I would think as well.
Possibly.
And I just think that is then your 5-6 clubs that are competing at the top end of Super League anyway. And if we're allowing them to go and get the best talent in the world, potentially, obviously, of course, I don't see how that's a bad thing for Super League. We all want, the key for Super League is not to grow within the bubble, it's to grow outside of the bubble.
Yeah.
That's the problem the sport has had for a long time. And if you are able to go and get bigger names, bigger talent that can get you on the back pages of newspapers, on the TV channels, I think that is probably where the game needs to be shooting now. We all know within our bubble of rugby league, it's a great game and there's some unbelievable talent, but we need to convince people that there is more out there. And I think the way you do that is by getting more eyes on it. And the easiest way to do that is allowing your clubs to go out and spend what they believe they can spend on the best talent in the game. And that's not rugby league, that's rugby full stop.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Just very, very lastly, just a story close to my heart, I suppose. Halifax Panthers, a week on from a shock. Well, it was a shock liquidation. I don't really know what to say about it, to be honest. I'm still a little bit,
because it's all happened
so quick,
unbelievably quickly. I think with Featherstone and Salford, you could see it coming over the hill, couldn't you? There was no surprise when the RFL pulled the plug on that Featherstone ownership bid.
Yep.
There was certainly no surprise when Salford ultimately succumbed in the courts. But facts, you and I both know. They weren't making any noises that this was happening. In fact, they were telling people quite the contrary as recently as the game against Gould the day before.
24 hours
Yeah,
earlier.
as recently as the game against Gould, there were noises around Fax that, we'll be absolutely fine. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, they get the rug pulled from under their feet. And like you say, it's a story close to your heart, Matt. Do you expect them to be on the field again this year? We know that there's sort of a soft deadline, isn't there, of that London game. They're fortunate. Yeah. They've got the bye week this week, haven't they, which comes at an unbelievably good time for them. Is that London game, is that March the 1st?
March the 8th is the London game. So they need, if they're not on the field by then, it'll be next year. Now, what I would say from what I know, there will be a club. Yeah. The club will come back. It's whether it's March 8th or next year.
Yeah. I forgot, is that about 21 days from now, something like
3 weeks. Yeah. A lot of work is going in to make things happen. There have been different parties that are interested. I think one's dropped off. I think there's 2 now. Potentially they may come together, which I think would be good because, it needs a lot of money to get them through. Yeah. But we'll see. Time will tell. All really there is to say at the minute is they're trying. There is a lot of effort going in to get them back. But even if they come back, there is a much bigger story here about sustainability. Something that we have spoken about for years. And to be honest, a surprise that more clubs haven't fallen by the wayside for me sooner. But it is alarming that you've had 3. I mean, Salford's a very different case.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
two big clubs.
Two of the non-Super League big hitters, let's be honest.
As someone said to me last week, if you were to draw up an ideal second division for rugby league that had 12 teams in it, Fax and Featherstone would categorically both be in it.
They'd be in the top 6, wouldn't
they? They've both won the Challenge Cup. In the last 40, 50 years, they've both been in the top flight.
Normally there or thereabouts at the top of the chart.
Normally there or thereabouts at the top, yeah. And it's interesting as we're talking about potentially Super League salary cap going one way, the talk I'm getting from the Championship clubs now is probably time for a salary cap in the Championship or some level of control to, the sums that are being thrown around. This is not necessarily by Halifax or any given club, but, there's lads earning 40, 50 grand in the Championship now, playing once a week and training twice a week, and that is unsustainable in its very, very nature, especially when the crowds are what they are, and the financial... We're not in that world of 10 years ago where Super League clubs or the RFL were able to trickle money down the pyramid into the Championship. Clubs are getting very, very modest central distribution income now. Gone are the days of where your clubs at the bottom end of League One were getting £75,000. You're talking... Good Championship clubs don't even get £75,000 now. So there has to be some level of control put on the clubs to be able to spend. And again, you could drill into figures. Someone said to me £500,000. Someone said £400,000.
I think they probably need to get through this year about 300 grand. That's what they're going to need now. But in terms of the salary cap thing, I think I don't know if it needs a salary cap, but what it needs is, if you are going to spend X amount of money, you prove you have that
on turnover.
And until you can prove you have that money in the bank, you can't spend it. That's the way for me. And because the money that's been spent, I found out how much Halifax was spending. How there's no way that can operate on
Featherstone largely the same. We know Featherstone have spent overs for a prolonged period of time with no return, really. Yeah. Obviously, they chased the Super League thing at one point. They were close when they played Toronto. But the last couple of years, when there's been nothing at the end of the line for them with the gradings, Featherstone realistically, no chance. And spending far too much money. I get you want to be ambitious, but you have to tread that line between being ambitious and having a club at the end of the day. And I wonder if that's where Fax fans want the club to go now. You look at some clubs in the Champ that pride themselves on, look, we might not win the comp, but we don't spend a penny more than we can afford to spend. Batley Bulldogs jump out as a huge example. Very, very well-run club. Yeah. And I just think, is it better... I sense there's some sort of reset coming in the Championship, whether it is a salary cap, whether it is something based on turnover. I think the people at the top of the RFL have sensed that there are clubs spending beyond their means, and unlike in Super League, where there are owners with deep pockets ready to put it in, a town like Fax doesn't have an abundance of rich, wealthy, multi-millionaires, apart from you, obviously, to put money in and save clubs.
You can stop.
But I sense there's some sort of reset coming in the Championship, and Fax is probably the sort of catalyst for that, I would think. Just from the pure shock factor around it. But what I would say, I think it's really taken the edge off what has been a great start to the Championship. That the fixture formatting was controversial, it was convoluted, but it looks like it's working. You look at the top of the league, Barrow, Rochdale and Dewsbury are all 3 from 3 on top of the league.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's some great stories to be told in the Championship, as there is every year. We just need to ensure the stories are on the field, not off it.
Yeah, and just very, very lastly, I'm just want to say this for Salford fans, I'm really pleased they got the win.
Absolutely.
And it looked like they had a decent crowd in.
Yeah.
Really glad that they got their day, because it's been a rough 12 months, rough 18 months, hasn't it? So good for them. Right, I think we're done. That was the first ever Love Rugby League podcast. Hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you like and subscribe so that you keep seeing our content as we keep coming back. We'll be back every week doing all sorts of stuff. Hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you to Aaron, and we will be back next week. See you later.